Table Topics. Today we're going to be talking about a subject that is a little more serious than our usual subject matter. Last week, the world watched in horror as a young man, only 20 years old, walked into a daycare in Belgium and started slashing at babies. It resulted in the deaths of 2 babies as well as one of the caregivers. Now, this whole act of violence has brought to our table the discussion about capital punishment. Obviously, we heard of such a horrible act of violence, and I don't know about you, but I felt a lot of hatred. Like, how could someone do that? What do you guys think? Should this guy die for what he did?
Well, first of all, I saw in a couple of the interviews, one man said something along the lines of, if the whole world existed as an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, then we would all be blind and toothless.
Hammurabi's Code. That's it. Eye for an eye. That idea, and that was so literal. It's ancient Babylonian law. If you kill someone's child, then someone would kill your child. And so now, I guess the idea of capital punishment relates back to that. If you are a murderer, then you deserve to be put to death.
There's a statistic that says that incarcerating someone, at least in Kansas in 2003, it cost 70% more to put someone through the death penalty than it did to put them into jail. And that includes the cost of incarceration.
Why?
How is that?
Because of all the appeals that have to happen and all the juries have to be called out, I guess, because it takes so long and there's just a lot of litigation that's involved.
So it costs more to, go through the process of administering the death penalty than to keep that person incarcerated for the duration of their lives.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's interesting because a lot of people feel that the death penalty is an easy penalty because you're just, you're put to death, whereas living incarcerated, in a real prison is more suited punishment.
And that people are paying, the general public is paying to keep that person alive and well.
No, but the idea is that keeping them alive and well in a relative manner, keeping them fed and alive and healthy, it still forces them to live with their crime and prisons are not a playground. We're not talking about like CEO tax fraud prisons. We're talking about hard times.
It's dangerous in those prisons. And I think, though, if we go back to this act of violence, if you were the parent of one of these babies, how would you feel? You put your baby in the daycare in the morning, and you expect that night you're going to come and pick it up, safe and sound, and you lose your baby in such a horrible way. Do you think that if it was you, that you would want capital punishment?
I think that the reality of the world is that there's morality that stops people from committing horrible crimes, and then there's fear of punishment. And so fear of punishment is what society institutes to protect us when morality fails. Because of psychological disease or anything.
I think that someone who is willing to slash babies doesn't have a fear of punishment.
That's it. Morality fails.
Morality and fear of punishment. Nothing would work because he had a bag of weapons apparently, and he just biked off into town after committing this crime as if nothing happened. So obviously this person is psychologically not well.
I have a question. We never really have to make these decisions on our own on a personal level. It's not like voting. But if you had to vote whether or not capital punishment should, if it was you, just you who decided, what kind of factors would figure into your decision? I know for me there'd be this, I wish I could just say, no, put them away for life so that they'll never hurt anyone, there's never any chance of them getting out, but I don't have to be the one to decide to say, they're guilty, they're done. How do you feel? What moral factors or logical factors come in?
I think just like you said, if you could know that you could close that person away, especially because if it costs more money, for me it's a cost thing. It's like if it costs more money to kill someone than it does to put them away, because that would be one of my big arguments. Why are we, allowing this person to have a cushier lifestyle? It would be easier to just get rid of them. But if it does cost less, then I would say, okay, put them away. But what happens when they get out in 25 years or maybe even 8 years?
Another thing, do you guys watch Dexter?
I love Dexter.
Vigilante. So explain it real quick for people who haven't seen it.
Dexter is a show about a man who is a serial killer, but he kills serial killers. So is he a good guy or is he a bad guy? When he was basically found by a cop at the young age of 3, and he witnessed his mother murdered before him. So the idea is that he'll never be normal. So if he's going to be a killer, he might as well channel it into killing people who are bad guys. So he is doing good to society, but yet there's a question of where do you draw the line? How come you're allowed to kill people and these people aren't, even though they are serial killers?
Very well said, and that is just a symbol of our response. I mean, he does it as a vigilante, and he takes the responsibility off our hands. He goes and just kills the serial killers for us so we don't have to decide.
And he becomes a protagonist because
Yes.
he's done something that we secretly in our hearts would like to do, but we're not that comfortable when the state or the country or the government does this, because for some reason I think morally we still want our government to not be eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
But there are people who feel very strongly about this, and you can imagine the parents of, you know, victims, or the family in general, victims. I say parents because we're specifically speaking about that case in Belgium, and they perhaps don't feel as philosophical about it as we do.
Well, I always wonder about the person who actually does the killing in capital punishment, because they are killing as their job on behalf of the state. I think that would be a really difficult job to do, and why should we require someone in their job to kill?
Well, and I also just
The
got
army,
thinking
no
about,
different. Yeah.
right, that's true. How do you apply for that position? Well, like, if maybe that person is channeling their murderous ways.
It's an old school. I mean,
illegal.
you think of the executioner. The executioner got a lot of money because it's a job that people don't like doing.
Well, I think all of us felt horrible for what happened last week, and all of us will probably take some time to reflect on what are our thoughts on capital punishment. We'd love to get in dialogue with you. What do you think? Do you think it's a valid way to punish someone who's done something horrible, or should these people get a second chance? We'd like to hear more from you, so leave your comments and stay tuned next week for more table topics.